I'm Neil Hunt. I'm the head of content for TV Connect, and I'm here with Nick North, Director of Audiences at the BBC. Nick, how have you been enjoying TV Connect so far?
It's a fantastic show. It's almost too big. There's so much to take in. What's really interesting is how many big stands there are of suppliers that are new to me. So it's an educational experience. It's very encouraging to see, in what good health the TV industry is in, and it's always very thought-provoking to be here, whether it's in the sessions, but also just wandering around, looking at the new opportunities for how audiences are able to engage with content in all these different ways, in fantastic new formats and so on. So yeah, it's good.
And of course, like audiences is the heart of what you do. Can you tell me a little bit about what it is that or how the BBC uses that audience data and how you go about capturing it?
Well, audiences is at the heart of everything we do, and that's actually one of the BBC values that's on our security badges. And that is true. That has always been true, even ever since the 1930s when the first sort of listener research was set up. The role that the audience plays in shaping the content that the BBC creates in order to make sure that it's serving every household in the UK is really mission critical. And so we're in a position where the data that we collate, produce ourselves, plays a role in strategic decision making within the executive board, the executive committee, all of the editorial decision-making boards and so on. So it really is a key component of decision-making across the whole of the BBC, across TV, radio, and the design and engineering teams.
Now, obviously you were on a panel earlier with discussing the impacts of the millennial generation. How do you go about analysing that and serving up to what is considered quite a disruptive market?
Yeah, I think it is quite challenging when you're looking at an audience who, for example, the teenagers, they will have grown up in a digital environment. Social media plays an incredibly important part in their lives, communicating with friends, catching up with the latest memes that what is hot, so that they can use that as social capital in their friendship groups and so on, and understanding what role public service broadcaster plays in that space is important. Understanding what they are doing in those spaces when our traditional measurement tools, which are still in good health, barb for television, is now developing and expanding to be able to capture the player data that we and the other broadcasters have within our own servers, and we share that with them. But beyond that, into social spaces, one of the really important and challenging areas of my team's role is understanding consumption on social platforms and making sure that our relationship with social platforms is the right one, so that we can get information back from those platforms about how audiences are engaging with our content on those platforms, to ensure that we are making the content available in those spaces in the right way that will engage with audiences, be it a Snapchat channel, an Instagram feed, whatever it might be, so that we're sure that the investment that we're making in those spaces is delivering incremental reach, stronger engagement with audiences, building that sort of multiple touch points that enhance the brand relationship over time. Very difficult to do, because some of these spaces are secure spaces where it requires a collaboration with the third party to make that happen. But that's part of the challenge of the job, to piece together the data from our own sources, from industry sources, from third parties, to then build a more complete picture of how young people interact with media today.
That's interesting. You mentioned the kind of extension beyond just the content itself. I mean, I suppose the word content itself has kind of morphed out of control somewhat a little bit in the past few years. Now, I mean, we heard from Turner Broadcasting yesterday about how they now think about, things beyond just the content itself into a kind of brand extension. How does that work for the BBC?
I think that's a really important part of how we engage with audiences across all platforms. And what we've seen in our analysis of what drives support for the BBC is that it's not only about time well spent meeting your needs, be they information needs, relaxation needs, whatever it might be, but it's also about those multiple connections that you have with the brand, enriches and strengthens your relationship with the brand. So content on, for example, BBC Three content, we look not only at levels of consumption, but we also look at what content is sparking user engagement, interests and likes and so on, that are indicators of a deeper engagement with that content than just viewing. And that's really important for us, because what the BBC's key performance metrics are around engagement with content that is memorable, that is high quality, that resonates and has an impact on people's lives. And therefore, these are good indicators that this is content that's standing out, that will be memorable. And for some of the content, again, for BBC Three, there's some hard-hitting documentaries in the mix there that I think are quite influential on people's lives, and that's public service within a digital space.
And that's value for money. Now, I suppose thinking about the BBC, you're uniquely funded, it's a unique organisation around the world. There's nothing quite like it really. How do you behave differently to the Turners or the Skies of the world with your data?
Well, I don't think we're unique. We work quite collaboratively and closely with the other public service media companies in Europe, for example, and we learn from each other. And many of us are under the same sorts of financial constraints. But yes, when we do operate within a market with commercial competition for time. The measure of our success is not only time, but is, as I was saying, time well spent with memorable content that meets the BBC's public purposes, that meets our kind of core mission to inform, educate and entertain. So the metrics that we have set up reflect that broader purpose, if you like, than, I won't say simply sort of bums on seats, but eyeballs are not are really just the start of it for us. And the opportunities that we have, particularly with younger audiences in digital spaces, allows us to experiment and develop and transform, I think, what public service media means in a digital space.
And then I suppose just a couple more points to touch on. That kind of youth audience, or the millennials that are disrupting everything, do you think they're going to grow up? Is it as simple as that? Or do you think that the kind of way that they have expected consumer content to be fed to them on demand when they want it has permanently changed the way the media will work?
I think, well, I would hope they'll all grow up, obviously, but in lots of different ways. But yeah, I mean, there is an age factor in there. They will grow up. Their needs will change. They will be looking to unwind at the end of a busy day in a way that perhaps that need doesn't loom large for many of them during their sort of teenage years. So their needs will change, and therefore they will turn more to a curated environment. And so there is an age effect, I'm sure. When they grow up is an interesting question, because, as we were hearing in the session earlier on, there is more people living at home for longer. And so when they become adults is perhaps changing, and for some of them being delayed for longer. And so that will have an effect. There are other social effects that we should take into account. Their opportunities within the job market and so on that change what they do. But I think that there is also a cohort effect, that these kids, young adults, have grown up with the expectation of anything, anywhere, anytime. But that means that the way that they come to content, the way that they minimize their risk, if you like, in choosing content is driven by social recommendation, is driven by behavior of their peers shared on social media, possibly while they're actually consuming content, is driven by different guides, if you like, different signposts to an older audience that will use the signpost of the EPG, the channel, the schedule in a way that is much less used by younger audiences. So we can see quite different sort of emergent behaviours of how people come to content, the routes to content are quite different among younger audiences for more of the choices that they make than for the old audience who rely much more heavily on the schedule. In the middle is kind of an interesting ground where parents are influenced by their children's behaviours and they start to interact with content in new ways. So I think that there is a cohort effect. What that will translate into in terms of time in front of the big TV, I think it's very difficult to know, but the evidence would be that people are not moving away from big screen TV. We see a lot of evidence that iPlayer is increasingly popular on the big screen. So the expectations, the way that people come to content will change and will continue to persist as these young audiences grow up. But there will also be a great deal in common because their life stage will change, their expectations, their needs, and so on will change.
Brilliant. Nick, thank you very much for your time today.
Okay, thank you.